Can you believe it? The first III video. I'm not surprised it was classic video game creepypastas, though. This is probably my favorite topic to cover because I grew up with this stuff. For those who don't know, a creepypasta originally meant a scary block of text you could copy and paste around the internet. Now it just means internet horror. But for this video, it's referring to the old, scary stories of the internet. Both fictional and more than. In this series, we look at creepypastas related to video games. With that information out of the way, I have an unfortunate piece of information to share. This is probably the last episode of classic video game creepypastas. I've run out of stories I have anything to say about. But worry not, for this finale won't be small. We aren't sending this series off without a bang. This might be a long video, or maybe I'm overhyping it and this is actually an averagely long video. Let us begin this trek back in time as we discuss classic video game creepypastas for the third time. When you hear Pokémon Black version, there are only so many things you can think of. For me, I think of the actual Pokémon Black version game, which is also likely what most would think of. Before Pokémon Black version ever came out, however, there was a different thing people thought of. Pokémon Black, now called Pokémon Creepy Black to differentiate it from the actual real official game, is a creepypasta about a copy of one of the first generation Pokémon games that just isn't quite what it should be. The story begins by establishing that the author likes to collect bootleg Pokémon games, stating that they find enjoyment in the poor quality translations. The author then goes on to say that they've already been able to find most of the games they used to have online, except for one. They provided an image of the cartridge for reference. Everything about the game itself starts off normal, with the normal Nidorino and Gengar intro. But reaching the title screen, one would find that the game is titled Pokémon Black version, and no Pokémon would appear next to the player character. It would continue normally from here until you got your starter. Alongside your choice, you were also in possession of another Pokémon, Ghost. It was level 1, looked like the many ghosts you'd encounter in Pokémon Tower, and strangely, it only knew one move, Curse. Curse is a real Pokémon move, but it wasn't introduced until later in the second generation of Pokémon. In battle, Ghost wasn't able to be attacked, as the defending Pokémon would be too scared to move. Curse, when used, would cause the screen to turn black, followed by the cry of the defending Pokémon at a much lower pitch than normal to play. Shortly after, the screen would return to normal, only the defending Pokémon would now be missing. If used in a trainer battle, then the Pokéball icons representing their Pokémon would be one less than it was before. Winning against a trainer would cause the battle command to return. Selecting Run would end the battle as normal. But selecting Curse would cause the battle to end, with the trainer now gone from the overworld. Leaving and re-entering the area would cause a tombstone to appear in their place, not too unlike those of the Pokémon Tower. Curse would fail against Ghost Pokémon, and trainers you'd fight more than once. It would only work during the final battle against them. The author now goes on to explain to us what happened to them after beating the game. After viewing the Hall of Fame, the screen would cut to black, with a text box saying, "Many years later." The game began again, with the player character as an old man standing and looking at tombstones in the Pokémon Tower. The player character could only move slowly and had no Pokémon, not even Ghost, who had been impossible to remove from the party prior to this moment. The overworld was empty, save for the tombstones that had been created with Curse. The player was only limited in movement by the lack of HMs. Even after leaving it, Lavender Town's music would continue to play endlessly. The author found that one of the cut trees was missing on the other side of Diglett's cave, allowing them to return to Pallet Town. When entering their home and standing on the exact tile the game started on, the screen would cut to black again. Sprites of all the Pokemon Curse had been used on would flash, and then trainers too. The Lavender Town music would slowly decrease in pitch, hardly sounding like music by the end of the sequence. A fight would then start. You, the old man, versus Ghost. The only functional option was fight. All that could be done was use struggle, which didn't even land. From there, the Ghost would attack, merely stating ellipses. Once the player's health was low, it finally happened. Curse. The screen would cut to black for the final time. That was it. There was just a black screen. Turning off the Game Boy and restarting the game would see your progress to have vanished. New game was all that remained. The author states they played through this game multiple times, and even did a playthrough without using Curse. All that did was remove the sequence between returning to Pallet Town and the final battle against Ghost. I will say exactly how I feel about this right now, instantly. I love this story. It is without a doubt a good classic creepypasta that holds up even today. The author, who is actually unknown apparently, didn't embellish the horror of the game, yet you could still feel it just fine. The worst they do is say such things as, "The implication was that the Pokemon died," and "Regardless, this children's game has made me think, and it has made me cry." Which is, that's a little on the nose, but considering the age of the story, having come before most creepypastas, this is a damn good tale. I know the story is 99.9% fictional and made up, and blah blah blah, but imagine for a moment that this all really happened. Suspend your disbelief and imagine if this was all a real tale of a real ROM hack that the author found. How fucking cool would that be? Not just the idea that a spooky story was true the entire time, but the idea that this ROM hack exists at all. I highly doubt it could, given the fact that this story was apparently written around mid-2010. But just imagine, I would totally play this game. It wouldn't shock me at all if someone had already made a ROM hack just like it either. I think the story itself would have been made better by not directly stating or implying death itself. I feel if it were more vague, it would be a lot scarier. Imagine if you had no idea what happened to the Pokemon and trainers that had been hit with Curse. The mystery of their fates. What untold suffering they're damned to. That's the true horror here. The idea that this unstoppable being can just decide to put you in an eternal hell far greater than even your worst definition of such a place could be. I had actually been avoiding this one due to its scale. Ben Drown has become more than just a creepypasta, though it started as one. It has definitely gone far beyond it now. For the sake of not posting this video on my 86th birthday, I will only be covering the creepypasta part. Anything beyond it involving, say, the Moon Children will be omitted. Our story begins with a post on the X board of 4chan. "Okay X, I need your help with this. This is not copypasta. This is a long read, but I feel like my safety or well-being could very well depend on this. This is video game related, specifically Majora's Mask. And this is the creepiest shit that has ever happened to me in my entire life." The author, who we'll just call Jaduzable, decides to find some Nintendo 64 cartridges at some garage sales, as his time spent with Super Smash Bros. Has begun to grow stale. He managed to nab a few games and was preparing to leave when he spotted something. One last garage sale. He was greeted by an old man, and after an exchange, he was presented with a copy of Majora's Mask that the man was willing to give him without any payment. Giving thanks, Jedusible left with his cartridge, and the man replying with, "Goodbye then." Upon reaching home, a suspicion of his was confirmed. A save file already existed on the cartridge. Ben was the name. The man very likely had said, "Goodbye, Ben." The author started a new save, naming himself Link. The game ran fine despite its appearance, but only a few minor issues related to graphics. Unnervingly, however, the NPCs in the game would sometimes refer to the player as Ben. Must have been a bug. Jedusible, unnerved, eventually decided to delete the Ben save. That didn't fix it at all. Now the NPCs would call him nothing at all. The story goes on to explain a lot of details about Majora's Mask, so much so that I don't think I should actually read it all. As a fan of the game, I understand it, but it's a lot. Like, it is truly, truly a lot. I'll give some key details though. Jedusible attempts the 4th day glitch, the glitch that allows the player to reach an impossible 4th day of the 3-day period before the moon crashes into the game's world. The result for Jedusible, however, was instead being sent to the final boss room, with the main antagonist, Skull Kid, hovering over him. No matter where he would go, the Skull Kid would stare at him, unmoving. The game would seemingly communicate with him, using messages already existing in the game, until he finally agreed to a prompt. Go to the lair of the temple's boss? From here, the game goes a little insane. The most notable point is the appearance of the Elegy of Emptiness Link statue. For those who don't know, you can play a song in the game on your instrument, allowing you to summon a twisted shell of your current form. This statue appears to follow Jedusible in his new Fever Dream version of the game. Another key moment was when the Link save file was replaced with Your Turn, as well as the reappearance of the Ben save file, just as it had been prior. Hehe, Ben. In the next post by Jedusible, he mentions having a dream about the Elegy of Emptiness statue, and that in said dream, it was following him around. In the dream, he remembered calling it Ben. Jedusible attempted to find the man who had given him the copy, only to be told he was moving by a neighbor. Said neighbor was asked who Ben was, and he replied with a story about a boy 4 doors down named Ben, who was involved in an accident, but that was all he would divulge. The rest of the post is more creepy and unusual gameplay. Jedusible's next post showed his paranoia, stating that he sees Ben in his dreams and through the corner of his eye. The game wasn't just using pre-existing messages anymore either. It was talking to him. You can see where this is going. I'm not going to continue to tell the whole story because, again, this thing is long and even longer still. The basic idea is that Ben, a child who drowned, is haunting and tormenting Jedusible through this copy of Majora's Mask. Jedusible's roommate next posts that Jedusible's health has been declining, but he's going home now. The thing is, though, Jedusible doesn't have a roommate. I didn't do this story the justice it deserves, at all, and I implore you to either go read it yourself or watch another YouTuber's coverage of it, as this video would go on for 3 extra hours if I did it myself. Now, my thoughts on this story. It uses actual gameplay footage made by the author to sell the story, but it's all fake. This isn't me exposing the story as a fake either, because the author came clean about it. The entire thing was an ARG. People were allowed to get involved with the story and everything. The footage made it a creepypasta people genuinely believed in for a while. Nobody had done anything like this up until then. While I don't find the story itself all that scary, I do feel it's just good. A solid, spooky tale, if not a bit lengthy. I've always been fond of the idea that a game could contain an Easter egg so well hidden that it takes players decades to find. I mentioned this in the last classic video game Creepypastas video, in reference to the I Hate You creepypasta. Here, the idea is partially explored, though I'm not sure to what extent. Easter egg, Snow on Mount Silver, or as I'll be calling it, Snow on Mount Silver, is a creepypasta about a cheat code that unlocks a very unsettling event in Pokémon Silver. The author explains that her and her brother were big fans of Pokémon, and her brother had accidentally destroyed his copy of Pokémon Blue using a Game Shark. From there, the siblings found themselves at odds when it came to using the Game Shark. The author refuses to touch the thing, while the brother continued to use it. One day, the author finds her brother with all his games broken. He had destroyed them all. Upon realizing the author had her Game Boy, he freaked out and grabbed it from her, throwing it across the room. Luckily, it was fine, as when she turned it on, it was working. The sound, however, was also on. The sounds of the Game Boy triggered another violent reaction. The brother ended up in the hospital for 2 days. When she went to visit him, the brother asked her to get rid of what remains of his games. She went home and was going to do just that, only to begin to question what could have scared him so much. She eventually found his copy of Silver and the Game Shark. With them came a notebook. In the notebook were cheat codes, with one very clearly scribbled out with the intent of removing it from the book. But the pen marks from the code were deep enough to be seen beyond the marker that had been used to black it out. Easter egg, Snow on Mount Silver, it read. She remembered what he had said. White everywhere, and then black. Curiosity had taken control. Sliding Silver into her GBA, she found the game to be playing normally, until she saw her brother's save. A playtime of 999 hours was present. A clear impossibility. The question entered her mind. His note said Easter egg. Didn't that mean that whatever this was already in the game? From here, she was greeted with the actual gameplay. After a long black screen, static filled the overworld, appearing to be heavy snowfall. She checked the team and found nothing to be out of the ordinary besides the washed out colors, almost frostbit. Attempting to move down the mountain the player was on only gave the response, I can't turn back now. Attempting to use fly would get, I can't fly in this. Attempting to use an escape rope, I can't go back anymore. The text would change with each attempt to go back. I can't run away. I can't go back down. I can never go back. The author continued, trying to press forward up the mountain, only to find the movement speed was much slower, and would only get slower as she got closer to the end. The snow would only grow more intense, too. I'm cold, the text box read. One by one, messages would appear stating that Pokémon in the party had died. Checking these Pokémon would reveal morbid changes to their sprites. At the summit, Red wasn't present, and at last, the snow had stopped falling. Only a Pokeball poked up out of the snow. Interacting with it triggered a battle with a Celebi, one that used Perish Song before a Pokemon could even be sent out. A horrible screech came from the Game Boy. From here, the player would end up mangled, and a battle would begin against Red. All his Pokemon mangled too. The most notable was Pikachu. A crooked smile spread across its face. It was already dead, having 0 HP. Using Pain Split, It brought the player's Typhlosion down with it. Red now appeared and spoke. It's over. A horrible shrieking came from the Game Boy again as the text, Used Destiny Bond, appeared. From there, it was truly over. The screen turned white, then black, then silence. This story emits an energy that a lot of classic creepypastas do. It's a bit dramatic, but I think it's at the very least unsettling. I can't say I'm as scared as the author, but I can say, at least while reading this, I was a bit jumpy. I like the idea that this code was already in the game, and these sprites as well. The idea that all of this was already in the game, and it just took a cheat code to activate it all. Or maybe the cheat code magically made it all happen. Nobody knows. But we do know, as the last line states, that winter, the snow fell thick. This subject is probably one of the most relatable for some. Herobrine is an entity that all the little childrens out there have feared at one point. Maybe you feared him and still fear him now. And really, there's no blaming you if you still fear him. The idea of Herobrine is chilling, and as a result, he's become very popular. So popular that he has been acknowledged by Mojang themselves through a mixture of Easter eggs and changelog lines that state they removed him from the game. Is there really a Herobrine to be found? That's for you to decide. Now, how did this all start? If we were to believe that the original tale is the creepypasta itself, then it would have started with someone getting a screenshot of him and posting about how all attempts to find out what he is led to dead ends. It is stated that Herobrine is Notch, the original developer of Minecraft's dead brother. I don't particularly want to give any validity to this though. Notch has denied it, and it's a bit weird to want to say it's the dead brother. Even if Notch had a dead brother, it's a bit disrespectful to go claiming he haunts the game, in my opinion. For me, Herobrine represents the thing I miss about video games. A good urban legend, myth, or hoax can keep a video game alive for far longer than it would have been otherwise. With dumping an entire game's files day one seeming to be the tradition nowadays, we can only pray to Herobrine that he remains hidden away where no data miners can find him. Herobrine himself, the entity feared by many, has had a bit of internet folklore associated with him. People kinda made up stuff to add to Herobrine, like him living on the bedrock roof of the Nether, or him having a dedicated summoning method that involves building an altar and lighting it with flint and steel. Let's not forget the Copeland streams, where a faked Herobrine encounter made everyone collectively shit themselves early on. Now, funny story. I used to play a lot of modded Minecraft back years and years ago. I played with an Aether-like mod called the Ether, and it had a mob in it that looked a lot like Herobrine. So imagine my sheer terror, turning around while on peaceful mode to see Herobrine staring me down. I posted about it on the Minecraft forums, screenshot included, but that post seems to have been wiped clean. It's gone. I can't find the screenshot either. It was around 1.5, I think, right around the Redstone update. It's truly wild stuff. I've always been a fan of Pokémon. Ever since Red and Green came out, I've always been looking forward to new releases. A decade has passed since any new releases, but that doesn't stop me. Fan games exist and they're all fun, but I can't help but find myself going back to the originals. These fan games just don't feel as big I decided to attempt to play the game on an emulator, but it crashed too often for me to enjoy it. This meant my last resort was to throw money out there and hope what I'm getting is actually what I purchased. When the copy of Pokemon Red came in the mail, I was pleasantly surprised to find the well-maintained cartridge that I did. The seller hadn't fucked something up or tried to scam me. It seems my Pokemon adventure had only just begun. Popping the cartridge into my Game Boy, I started up the game and found it working just fine. The title screen was all that I remembered it to be, and the intro was the same. Getting my starter, I chose Bulbasaur. I always felt Bulbasaur was underrated compared to the other two, especially given how Charizard was a dragon type, making it incredibly overpowered at a relatively early point in the game. I named my Bulbasaur Sam. Then me and Sam began our adventure together. I was worried the game would be too easy for a veteran like me, but surprisingly it wasn't. Brock had a Graveler, which I didn't quite remember, but it was able to survive a hit from Sam, unlike his Geodude. I watched as Sam's HP almost completely depleted from one hit. This fight was intense, but I won anyways. Moving on, I fought Misty and Lieutenant Surge with little issue, though Misty having a seal caught me off guard. It also knew Ice Beam, which, once again, almost made me lose. Thankfully, I still pushed through. Seems I had forgotten a lot about this game already. It was the trek through the dark cave that started something I wouldn't wish on anyone. Rock Tunnel without Flash seemed easy at first, but every time I'd get somewhere in the cave, I would be transported back outside as though I had made a full loop. This grew frustrating enough for me to just go and get Flash. Using it, I saw something briefly in the darkness of the cave. A figure. It, it looked like a person, only pure black. It was gone just as soon as it had appeared. This woke a memory that had long slept in the back of my head. When I was a kid, my friends would always tell me that they saw the most wild things in their games. Though among these stories, each of them shared a consistent tale. They remember seeing a dark figure when using Flash in the rock tunnel. This was at a point where gold and silver were the big fuss, and no one could back them up on it, as we were the only ones still playing red and green. But I was the only one who didn't remember this happening. I didn't believe them. Now I think I do. It's a bit chilling, but nothing terrible. I made my way through Rock Tunnel, through Lavender Town, and to Celadon City, where I started to get an odd feeling. It's hard to say why, but I felt not alone anymore. I started to look around my well-lit room and couldn't find a reason for this feeling at all. It only persisted, though. Everything was fine, right? I had no reason to fear. I got the Silph Scope, cleared Pokemon Tower, and began to head back to Vermilion City so I could take the SSN to Maroon Village and get the Pokeflute, but the way I did it, I let my curiosity get the best of me. I went back through Rock Tunnel. I was just curious. The figure, it didn't appear this time. I exited and re-entered. The figure did not appear. I kept this up. 5, 6, 7 more times. The figure did not appear. I was hallucinating, clearly. I started going through the rock tunnel for real. And this time, something happened. As I reached the exit, a wild encounter began. The encounter was against nothing. Like, literally nothing. The name of the thing was blank and there was no cry. I naturally wanted to catch it and see what was up, but the ball immediately failed, revealing an actual sprite, a bug catcher. The trainer sprite was a bug catcher. It had no name, no level, and an empty HP bar, but it was visible this time. Used appeared on the screen in the text box. No name for either the user or move. It didn't have any effect on Sam. This was really weird, and it didn't help that I was already on edge. The screen turned black, and the exit sound was heard. I was outside the cave, as I had wanted to be. Now able to return to Cerulean City, that encounter was odd. But what was more odd was the text box that popped up afterwards. Get out. It was ominous, I will admit. I was shaking a bit at that point. I couldn't explain the dread, but now I had a good reason. This isn't a thing I remember from the game at all. This doesn't belong in the game, and I had to stop playing for the day. The next day I went back with a less paranoid mindset. I hoped to at least accomplish something with picking the game back up. But my heart dropped when I loaded my file. I didn't save. I was back at the start of Rock Tunnel, right before entering. A chill ran up my spine as a thought popped into my head. I wondered if it would show up this time. Bad idea. Entering the cave, I used Flash. The screen went black. A low groan came from the Game Boy and I screamed. The Game Boy was now emitting a horrific, horrible hiss as a face appeared on the screen. It wasn't just a sprite, it was someone's actual face rendered on the screen, screaming in anguish. Text boxes popped up. Get out. Go back. Never come back. Leave. Stop playing. Go away. Run. The compressed screams of agony and suffering continued to explode from the Game Boy as the screen cracked. Something was oozing out of it, and I didn't want to know what. I threw the damn thing against the wall, and the noise stopped. I lay there in my bed, crying for a while. I don't remember how long it took for me to get up and look, but when I did, I only wanted to cry more. Game Boys don't fucking bleed. I've been trying to collect my thoughts for the past hour. It's dark outside. I can hear the Game Boy in the other room. I'm pretty sure the garbage can must be overflowing by now and it won't stop bleeding. I can't sleep. I can't think. I'm so tired and so weak. But I feel it watching me. It's watching, and it's all my fault. So tired. Out of all of these stories, this one I genuinely wasn't expecting to be better than I remember. I heard the story years ago and thought it was good, but coming back, I actually teared up a little. Just a fair warning though, this story does touch upon the subject of, self-afflicted endings. Come Follow Me is a story about a detective trying to figure out why Pokémon Red and Green were causing children between the ages of 10 and 15 to behave in a self-destructive way. The children who survived their attempts were not spared from their own madness, continuing to attempt to harm themselves, while screaming and attempting to flee if Pokémon Red and Green was introduced. The investigators continued to attempt to find why this was happening, and would only come up empty-handed until a name of interest came up. Shiro Miura. A programmer not listed in the credits. He had ended himself shortly after the release of the game. Entering his apartment, they found notes scattered around the place with messages such as, "Do not enter," "Watch out," and "Come follow me." Though not knowing what they meant, the detectives knew this was likely a lead. They attempted to speak with one of the map designers that Shiro was friends with, Koji Nisuno. Nisuno spoke of Shiro wanting to add a special Pokemon into the game unlike the others. The more he was questioned, the more he began to break down. Nisuno eventually brought a pistol to his head, muttering, "Don't follow me," before taking his own life faster than the detectives could stop him. All possible leads were dead. A couple months went by and now the death rate had dropped. The game's influence had seemed to fade. It all seemed to just be mass hysteria, until one of the detectives was given a letter. This letter was given to the detective on the street by a frail-looking woman. She said it was something he needed to know before disappearing into a nearby crowd. Returning to his office, the detective called the others in and read it out loud. The letter was written by Chiro himself. It talked about getting Nisano to let him be on the game team as a programmer. As the letter continued, the handwriting seemed to grow worse. He would talk about a glorious idea that he had, a way to program something unseen in any game before. It would be revolutionary to not just the gaming industry, but to everyone. It was easy to program too, and it would be able to use what already existed in the game. This letter ended abruptly without a goodbye or anything of the kind, only his name. Chiro was now a confirmed suspect. Everyone on the team apparently worked in pairs, with Chiro having worked with Sosuke Tamada. If anyone knew about the secret, it was this man. He was friendly, maybe even too friendly. While they all sat in his living room, he did not sit, instead choosing to stand near the window. There were no direct witnesses to what happened after, only a voice recorder sitting on the table. This is the unedited recording. Sosuke Tamada, what part did you have in the games Pokémon Red and Green? I was a programmer. That's all. Am I right in knowing that the programmers working on the game worked in teams? You would be right. And your partner, his name was Chiro Miura. That was his name. Chiro Miura. Could you tell us if Miura ever acted strange at all? Any peculiar behaviors you observed while working with him at all? I don't know him that well, really. He didn't meet up frequently. Only every once in a while to trade data, or when the entire group was called for a meeting. That's the only times I really ever saw him. He acted normal, as far as I could tell. He was a short man. I think this affected his consciousness. He acted weaker than any other man I met. He was willing to do a lot of work to gain recognition. This I do know. I think... Yes? You think what? I think he was a very weak man. I think he wanted to prove himself, regardless of this point. I think he wanted to make himself known for something special. Something that would make people forget about the way he looked, and pay attention to the powerful mind that lay inside his skull. Unfortunately for him, however, he didn't have much of a mind to back up that reasoning. Why do you say that? Well, it's a simple truth. He was nothing special, even if he wanted to believe so. You can't become greatness, even if you believe it. It's impossible. Something I think Chiro knew himself, somewhere deep in there. He knew it. Can you tell us what Chiro's part of the game was? What did he work on exactly? Nothing, nothing important. He worked on some obscure parts at the beginning of the game. It was Oak's part, to be exact. He worked on some of Oak's parts. When he's seen first, you see. What else? We know you know about the children and the deaths. We know it was Chiro who did it. He programmed something in the game. What are you implying? We're implying, since you're his partner, if you're hiding something from us, then you could just as much be responsible for those children's deaths as Chiro himself. You can't prove anything. Tell us what Chiro did to the game. What I told him to. You want to know, huh? You want to know what this is all about? Chiro was an idiot. He'd do anything for a bit of attention. Anything at all. He couldn't program worth a shit either. The one thing he could do, however, was be manipulated. You could tell him to do whatever. He'd do it. You wouldn't question it. He'd do it. Just to hear that thank you when you received the finished product. That was his reasons. That's all he wanted. I could control him flawlessly. He's a lot like Takanori. Of course, none of you knew this, but I was the one who brought up the idea of the game, the idea of the entire operation. I told the fellow what to do, and he followed me without doubt. He knows nothing, just like Chero. Don't move. We'll shoot. Let me tell you about a mechanic in the game. Consider it a hint, alright? If you walk around in the grassy area enough, a Pokemon will appear. You'll have a chance to go into battle with it. It's a necessary part of the game overall, you see. Step away from the window. We won't warn you again. At the start of the game, you have to walk into the grassy area before Oak appears, and you receive your first Pokemon. You understand me? Under normal circumstances, it was programmed that even though you're in the grassy area, no Pokemon will spawn. I made it different. I manipulated that Churro, told him what to put in the game, gave him all the instructions on how to do it, and he did it flawlessly. It's rare, but it can happen. Stepping in that grass. One can spawn. Sasuke, we don't want to shoot. Shoot me? Shoot me? You're as dumb as Chiro was. Once he found out the truth, he had to end it. It was his fault, after all. He shot himself because of it. If you're so determined to finish that case of yours, if you want to know, play the damn game yourself. Roll the wheel. And who knows? Maybe you'll learn the secret for yourself. A shot could be heard, loud enough to distort the audio. Sounds of screaming, murmuring could be heard. The table the recorder was on had crashed, ear-shattering distortions. Silence. Then laughing. Sasuke was laughing. And then words. Come, follow me. Come, follow me. And then nothing. The recorder continued to record until the tape ran out. There was nothing else on it. The police arrived on the scene quickly, and to their horror, they discovered Sasuke and the two detectives dead. They'd all been shot. The detectives had been shot multiple times, at least 10 each, before dying after being shot between their eyes. Sasuke himself had clearly died of 2 shots to his chest, straight through the heart. This game was causing a massacre. At least 100 children were dead. Nisano, the unsuspecting friend, dead. Chiro, the manipulated toy, dead. The 2 detectives, dead. Now even the creator, the cause of this atrocity, dead. The game was stretching far over its original intentions. It was killing anyone and everyone who got involved. The lead detective had decided to put this case away. The man who committed the crime was dead. There was no longer any reason to continue the case. All evidence, all cartridges, all notes, all the letters, they were locked away, kept in the darkness where they belong. There were talks about the entire thing, small conversations every now and then. But over the years, even these began to fade away. Eventually, the case was only a memory in the minds of those who had experienced it firsthand. 10 years passed. February 27th, 2006 was the date. The lead detective, the man who'd locked away the original evidence 10 years ago previous, was reminded of the awful events that had occurred. Although he was no longer in the force, he still had access to files and was helped when he could. The reminder of the event caused him to look back, to open the sealed container that held all the evidence collected. He read through the letters and the notes. He remembered the woman who had appeared to him on the street that one day and handed him that letter that led to the change of the entire case. He wondered who she was, where she had come from. Perhaps she was Chiro's mother, maybe Sasuke's. It was far too late to pursue any of this. Far too late. Sealing the container again, he saw a second one directly behind it. Pulling it out, He read the note on top of it. Evidence number 2104A. He opened it and looked inside. Filling the container were exactly 104 Pokemon Red and Green cartridges, each one in perfect condition, untouched since the day they had last checked them 10 years ago. He reached in and pulled one out. Pokemon Red. He hadn't seen one in a long time. He didn't know what he thought next, but he reached in his desk and pulled out an old Game Boy. He received it a long time ago, but it still worked. It was his son's, but he had died a few years ago. His wife was gone too. That was then, though. Popping in the cartridge in the back of the Game Boy, he turned on the system. Title screen. When the option to continue or start a new game, Tanaka was the child's name, the one who played it first. He was probably dead, along with the others. He pressed new game and started a new game. It was normal, average. He walked through, talked to his mother, went outside. He started walking towards the grass. In his head, he could hear Sasuke's words, even though he was not there. Even though he had never seen the man in his life, he could still see him, hear him. Come follow me. He was getting closer and closer, only a step or two away. Roll the wheel, and who knows? Maybe you'll learn the secret for yourself. He entered the grass. The screen did nothing at first, nothing at all. It just sat there, and so did the detective, completely frozen, as if time had stopped just before them. The screen went black, and then lit up again, the iconic green background with black text appearing. The lead detective's weary eyes grew wide. He couldn't help but read out what was there in front of him. Come follow me. Come follow me. Come follow me. I miss you, Dad. I miss you, my husband. I miss you so much. Tears formed in his eyes, falling down his cheeks. Screens and screens of text appeared, and he rapidly clicked the A button to continue it. It was his wife and his child. They were speaking to him, calling to him, crying with him. They wanted to see him. They loved him. He loved them. I love you too, he muttered in a hoarse, scratching voice. Come follow me. Become new again. We want to see you and hold you, and be with you forever and ever and ever and ever. And ever and ever. Don't stay away. You can see us too. We miss you. Come follow me. We love you. A black screen. The detective's eyes grew wide, his jaw dropping. The screen lit back up, and Oak was leading him out of the grass. Come follow me, said Oak. No, shouted the man, dropping the game onto the floor. He quickly fell forward, reaching for it, bringing the screen back to his face. Bring them back. Bring them back to me. The game continued on as usual, not responding to the detective at all. My wife, my child, listen to me. Bring them back to me, I said. Voices. He heard voices. Hundreds of voices. He turned around from his seat, looking behind him, and standing in his small room were children. Many children. Some had no eyes. Some had rings around their throats. Some were burned all across their bodies. They were screaming, reaching towards him. Bring back my mommy. Bring back my daddy. Bring back my pet. They all screamed out, reaching for the game, their mouths agape with horror and pain. I don't want them to go away. Bring them back to me. Bring them back to me. No, shouted the detective. It's mine. My family in here. Don't touch it. Horror was across his face. Come follow me, said a voice. The lead detective looked over, and in the corner of his room, next to an old desk, was Sasuke. He stood in the corner, tall, handsome, clean. A smile was on his face, stretching across his face. Come follow me. The lead detective jumped up, stepping back, trying to force away the children crawling towards him, reaching for the game held tightly within his hands. What's going on here? What's going on? Where's my family? Sasuke smiled generously. I'll show you. I'll help you get away from them, you see. Just follow me. Sasuke reached down and opened a drawer on the old desk. The lead detective, pushing through the crowd of children, trying to get away, looked inside. Sitting there, covered with dust, was his old gun from when he was in the force. He had not used that gun in many years and had put it away, not wanting to remember the things he had done with it. But right now, he didn't see it as something that caused pain or killed. It was shining. It was light. It was something that could set him free. "Just follow me," said Sasuke, picking up the gun and putting it in the lead detective's hand. He formed his hand to hold the gun, then brought it up to his temple. "Just pull the trigger, that's all." The lead detective turned around. The children were crawling at him, grabbing his legs and pulling at him. They reached for the game. He turned back towards Sasuke and smiled. "My family. I'll follow you." He pulled the trigger. His brain spread across the wall as he fell to the ground, dead. It was a few days before the body was discovered. It lay on the floor, blood everywhere. In one hand held an empty gun, and in the other, a classic Game Boy with Pokemon Red on the back. The battery had long died, and only an empty black screen was left. This was the final murder that the remaining authorities would allow. The last detective who was ever a part of this case, personally, carried all 104 cartridges away and burned them all, making sure not a single one survived. However, this is not the end of the story. The code was said to have survived, and was even passed down to the other language versions of the game. If you have an old Pokemon game, you can place the cartridge in the back of the classic Game Boy, turn it on, roll the wheel. Who knows? Maybe you'll learn the secret for yourself. As you can see, this story it's different. It's not your typical Pokemon creepypasta, but like, in a good way. The idea of being able to connect to the dead through a Game Boy it's an interesting concept, but the way it drives people to madness is terrifying. People so desperate to see the ones they've lost, and all you have to do is follow them. You'll notice that I started reading the story just like verbatim, because I don't think I can summarize it and do it justice. And man, I am terribly sorry for my mispronunciations and the melodramatic, terrible voice acting. If you're ever gonna do something in life, don't come follow me, because I have done a very strange job. I know this video has been about a lot of Pokemon creepypastas, but there's just so many good ones I want to talk about. In this story, Flash Caves, the author explains a strange trick they learned for getting through any cave in any Pokemon game that requires Flash in order to see. You should wander aimlessly in the dark of the cave, fighting wild Pokemon and trainers along the way. You'll eventually find a ladder not normally on the map. Climb down it. The normal transition will play, but the noise will repeat 4 times. A text box will appear simply asking, "Where do you think you are?" The music will momentarily distort, the screen will glitch, and sometimes you'll hear either a thud or a Pokemon's cry. In older games, nothing will immediately seem wrong, but in newer games, you'll notice that everything is black and white now. You'll be in a big empty room. The walls will have your information written on it, such as your player's name, your playtime, and your Pokemon's name. You can walk through one of the walls, though it depends on the game. When you do so, you'll exit the cave you were in. But the game will remain black and white. The music will be slowed, and occasionally it'll stutter. NPCs can also no longer be talked to. In Pokemon Yellow, your Pikachu's overworld sprite will now be a ghost. If you check your Pokemon, they too will all be ghosts, though still retaining their name, stats, and moves. Wild Pokemon will now run away from you. If you return to the cave, you can still fight wild Pokemon and trainers, just as long as you don't use Flash. If you play for long enough, you might just encounter your player character in full color somewhere. Talking to them causes text to pop up. Where do you think you are? The cycle begins anew. I had to throw this one in. I love this story. It's short, simple, weird, and somewhat ominous. It doesn't go too far into the creepiness, it goes just enough to leave me wanting more like it. Why not go try this for yourself? Today I've read to you multiple stories taken from the ancient texts. But what if I told you that these texts are incomplete? Yes, with time comes the fact that stories just fucking vanish and I can't find them anymore. Two specific stories stand out, and I can't seem to find them anymore, at all. Both of them are also Pokemon Creepypastas, go figure. The first one is a simple warning, telling the player that a cheat code exists in Pokemon White that if entered, pulls the player into the game, trapping them behind the screen forever. The other is more interesting. The second story claims that the author encountered Buried Alive in Black and White 2. They were using the PokeStar Studio encounter cheats to see all the weird characters that can appear when they encountered both Buried Alive and White Hand. They go on to state that they never got to see the forbidden animations associated with them due to defeating them so quickly, and they don't exactly know what they look like. After this, a quick concept is introduced. The idea that one of the movies you would be able to film included a movie based on the events of Lavender Town Syndrome. Wow, that video was quite long. I'm shocked I even went through with all that, given the number of obstacles that I had to overcome. At the very least, I did enjoy making this thing, but also hope you could do the same. Creepypastas were always a part of my life, and something I still enjoy today. I'm happy I got to share these stories with you. I still remember staying up way past my bedtime on school nights, reading these scary stories in the dark of my bedroom on my Nintendo 3DS. These good times are in the past, but I have no trouble making new ones. I hope you stick around for these new good times because really there's no end in sight. Have a fungus. It is stated that Herobrine is Notch's balls.